What if the roof over your head wasn't as secure as you thought? By 2026, sweeping changes to UK housing law could decide whether millions of people stay in their homes or face eviction. From stricter landlord rules to controversial new rights of repossession, these laws are set to reshape renting forever. For some, they promise fairer treatment and safer living conditions. For others, they threaten financial strain and fewer homes on the market. The question isn't just about policy, it's about stability, security, and the future of housing in Britain. Are you prepared for what's coming? Number 10. New eviction grounds, post-2026. By 2026, landlords will gain broader rights to reclaim their properties under newly established eviction grounds. While the Renters Reform Bill removes Section 21 no-fault evictions, this law redefines how and when landlords can take back a home. For example, landlords may evict tenants if they plan to sell the property, move family members in, or redevelop the building. These grounds are intended to balance the stronger protections given to tenants by ensuring landlords still retain a legal pathway to recover their assets. For many renters, though, it raises fears that eviction may still be possible under different names. For landlords, this law provides reassurance that their investment remains flexible. Owning a property will still allow for personal or financial decisions without being trapped in endless tenancies. However, the rules will require clear evidence, such as proof of sale or redevelopment plans, to prevent abuse. Critics argue that even with safeguards, tenants may remain vulnerable to indirect displacement, especially in overheated markets, where landlords can profit by selling rather than continuing to rent. Housing groups worry that the promise of stronger security could be undermined if these new grounds are applied too broadly. For tenants, the outcome will depend on enforcement. If the government ensures that landlords use these grounds fairly, renters may still enjoy stronger protections than they do today. But if loopholes are exploited, the law could trigger large-scale evictions disguised as legitimate property use. Imagine families forced to move because a landlord claims to sell, only to re-let at higher prices. By 2026, the test will be whether these new eviction grounds truly balance fairness or whether they leave millions of renters once again uncertain about the stability of their homes. Number 9. Affordable housing quota expansion. By 2026, developers in the UK will face tougher rules requiring them to deliver a higher proportion of affordable housing in every new project. This expansion of quotas is a direct response to the shortage of reasonably priced homes, particularly in cities where demand vastly outpaces supply. For tenants and first-time buyers, the change could mean greater access to properties that match their income levels. Affordable units are often priced below market rates, helping working families, young professionals, and lower-income households secure stable housing. The new law ensures that large developments can no longer prioritize only luxury apartments. For developers, the expansion of quotas represents both a challenge and an opportunity. Higher requirements may cut into profit margins, forcing builders to adjust project designs or negotiate with councils for planning approval. However, it also creates a clearer framework for building inclusive communities rather than exclusive enclaves. Some developers warn that tougher quotas could discourage investment in certain areas, slowing down construction. Yet supporters argue that without stricter rules, the housing crisis will continue to deepen, leaving entire segments of the population unable to find suitable homes. For communities, the impact could be transformative. Imagine new housing estates, where affordable flats sit alongside private ones, offering a mix of residents rather than deep divides between rich and poor. This not only addresses inequality but also strengthens social cohesion. By making affordable housing a legal requirement rather than a voluntary target, the government is shifting the balance toward fairness and accessibility. By 2026, the expansion of affordable housing quotas will stand as one of the most direct interventions in shaping how cities grow, aiming to make sure that future developments serve everyone, not just the wealthy few. Number 8. Airbnb and short-term let restrictions. By 2026, the UK will impose stricter rules on short-term lets, such as Airbnb, to free up housing stock for long-term renters. In many cities, the rise of holiday rentals has reduced the number of available homes for locals, driving up rents and hollowing out communities. The new restrictions will limit the number of days a property can be let out, require registration with local councils, and impose penalties on those who exceed legal limits. For tenants, this could mean a gradual increase in housing availability as properties return to the long-term rental market. For local communities, it promises to reduce the disruption caused by constant tourist turnover. For landlords and hosts, however, the changes could significantly impact income. Many property owners rely on platforms like Airbnb as a lucrative alternative to traditional renting. By capping the number of short-term lets and demanding strict compliance with safety and tax rules, the government aims to close loopholes that previously allowed some to profit at the expense of local housing needs. Critics argue that these restrictions may discourage tourism in smaller towns and cities, while supporters believe the benefits of stabilizing housing markets outweigh the potential losses. For renters, the law could reshape affordability in high-pressure areas. Imagine living in a city where flats are no longer constantly withdrawn from the market for holiday guests, where supply increases and prices stabilize. Families and young professionals will gain more opportunities to find permanent housing rather than competing with tourists. By 2026, the Airbnb and short-term let restrictions mark a decisive shift in housing policy, treating homes primarily as places to live, not just as investment assets or tourist accommodation. This could restore balance in urban centers struggling with housing shortages. Number 7. Deposit Reform Scheme. By 2026, the UK rental market will roll out a deposit reform scheme designed to ease one of the biggest financial burdens tenants face when moving home. Traditionally, renters must save thousands of pounds for a new deposit while waiting for the old one to be returned, often leaving them financially stretched. Under the new scheme, tenants will be able to transfer deposits directly from one property to the next. This means no more double payments, no long waiting periods, and a smoother transition between homes. For millions of renters, especially younger people and families, this could make moving far less stressful. For landlords, the scheme introduces changes in how deposits are managed and protected. Instead of holding on to large sums during lengthy disputes, landlords will work within a system where transfers are automated and tracked. While this creates more transparency, it also reduces the leverage landlords once held over tenants. Critics argue that it could complicate matters if damages are discovered after a tenant leaves, since the deposit may already have moved to another landlord. Supporters counter that existing protections, like deposit protection schemes and dispute resolution services, will still cover these scenarios. For tenants, the benefits are both financial and psychological. Knowing that their deposit will seamlessly move with them reduces one of the biggest barriers to mobility. It also encourages people to seek better housing opportunities without fear of being locked in by financial strain. By 2026, the deposit reform scheme is set to create a more flexible and renter-friendly system. While landlords may need to adjust to new rules, the overall aim is clear: make renting less of a financial trap and more of a manageable, stable option in an already expensive housing market. Number 6. Tenant Data Transparency Law. By 2026, the UK rental sector will introduce a tenant data transparency law, requiring digital tenancy agreements and the creation of a centralized rental database. This reform is designed to modernize the rental system, making contracts easier to track and disputes simpler to resolve. For tenants, the change means greater clarity about rights, responsibilities, and rental histories. Instead of dealing with piles of paperwork or unclear terms, renters will have standardized digital agreements that cannot be easily altered or hidden. The database will also give tenants access to their rental record, helping them prove reliability when applying for new homes. For landlords, the new system introduces stricter accountability. Every rental agreement will be logged, which makes it harder to exploit loopholes or engage in unfair practices. Transparency also means that repeat offenders, whether landlords who neglect repairs or tenants who fail to pay rent, can be identified more easily. While some landlords welcome the modernization, others fear that increased monitoring could expose them to fines or legal challenges if they fall short of compliance. The law reflects a broader shift toward data-driven housing regulation, where transparency becomes the foundation of accountability. For renters, the benefits are substantial. Imagine being able to log into a secure system and instantly access your rental contract, payment history, and landlord obligations. This not only strengthens tenants' bargaining power, but also reduces the fear of hidden clauses or sudden disputes. On the flip side, tenants who default or cause damage may find their records affecting future rental opportunities. By 2026, the Tenant Data Transparency Law will likely reshape the landlord-tenant relationship into one of greater accountability and mutual visibility, helping to build trust in a sector long criticized for its lack of fairness and openness. Number 5. Stricter HMO licensing. By 2026, landlords who let out houses in multiple occupation HMOs, properties shared by several tenants who are not part of the same household, will face much tighter licensing rules. HMOs are often seen in student housing, young professional flat shares, and low-cost rentals. They have long been criticized for overcrowding, safety risks, and poor maintenance. The new law aims to fix those problems by requiring landlords to meet higher standards before securing a license. This includes improved fire safety measures, minimum room sizes, and regular inspections to ensure properties remain safe and livable. For landlords, these stricter requirements bring new responsibilities and expenses. Many will need to invest in fire doors, upgraded alarms, better facilities, and safer layouts to comply with the rules. Those who fail inspections could lose their licenses, face heavy fines, or even be banned from managing rental properties altogether. While this may sound harsh, housing campaigners argue that too many tenants have been forced to live in unsafe conditions where profit came before safety. By enforcing stricter standards, the government is signaling that shared housing must no longer be treated as second-class accommodation. For tenants, these changes could make a dramatic difference in daily life. Living in an HMO will no longer mean squeezing into cramped, poorly ventilated rooms or worrying about safety risks. Instead, the focus will be on creating secure, properly maintained homes that protect residents' health and well-being. However, there is a risk. Landlords facing high compliance costs may reduce the number of shared properties they offer, potentially limiting affordable housing options for students and low-income renters. By 2026, stricter HMO licensing will test whether. Number 4. Mandatory energy efficiency rules. By 2026, every rented home in the UK will need to meet a minimum energy performance certificate (EPC) rating of C. This new requirement is part of the government's wider plan to cut carbon emissions and tackle rising energy costs. For tenants, this is a major victory because it means warmer homes, lower utility bills, and healthier living conditions. Poorly insulated properties are often cold, damp, and expensive to heat, leaving many families stuck in fuel poverty. With this law, landlords must upgrade insulation, install efficient boilers, or add renewable technologies to ensure their properties meet the standard. Landlords face both financial pressure and deadlines. Upgrading older properties can be costly, especially for homes built before modern energy standards. The rules, however, are non-negotiable. Landlords who fail to meet them risk hefty fines or being banned from renting out their properties. Supporters argue that while the upfront costs may be high, energy-efficient homes will save tenants money and add long-term value to landlords' investments. Critics worry that smaller landlords might sell up rather than pay for improvements, which could reduce the number of available rentals at a time when supply is already under strain. The financial challenge is especially steep for properties in historic buildings, where modifications are more complex. For renters, the benefits go beyond saving money. Imagine living in a flat that stays warm in winter without constant heating, or one where damp and mold no longer cause health issues. Energy-efficient homes also support broader climate goals, making housing part of the fight against climate change. By 2026, these mandatory efficiency rules will change the quality of millions of rental properties, creating a healthier, greener housing market while sparking one of the largest upgrade projects landlords have ever faced. Number 3. New rent cap regulations. One of the most controversial housing measures expected by 2026 is the introduction of rent cap regulations, which will give local councils the authority to limit rent increases in high-demand areas. This means places like London, Manchester, and Bristol, where rent has skyrocketed over the past decade, could soon face strict annual limits on how much landlords can charge or raise rent. For tenants, this offers relief from sudden price hikes that push households into financial strain. It creates predictability, allowing families to budget without the fear of being priced out of their communities. For campaigners, this is seen as a lifeline in the ongoing affordability crisis. From a landlord's perspective, however, rent caps spark real concern. Many argue that limiting rental income could make it harder to cover mortgage costs, property maintenance, or future investments. Some landlords may decide to exit the market altogether, selling properties instead of continuing to rent them. This could shrink the already limited rental supply, ironically driving competition and forcing people into longer waiting lists. Economists remain divided. While rent controls can protect existing tenants, they may also discourage new housing development if profits fall below sustainable levels. The debate is heated, and the long-term impact will depend heavily on how strictly local councils enforce the rules. For tenants, the new law provides immediate stability but comes with potential risks. While your rent might stay affordable, the quality and availability of homes could be affected if landlords cut corners or withdraw from the market. Still, for millions of renters facing relentless rent hikes, the introduction of caps feels like a necessary safeguard. By 2026, this regulation will test whether the UK can balance fairness for tenants with sustainability for landlords, reshaping how affordability is managed nationwide. Number 2. Decent Homes Standard expansion. By 2026, the government plans to extend the Decent Homes Standard, a set of rules that originally applied to social housing, into the private rental sector. This means every rented property will need to meet minimum requirements for safety, repair, and basic living conditions. For tenants, this represents a huge step forward, as many have been living in damp, poorly insulated, or unsafe homes without much recourse. The law demands that landlords upgrade properties to ensure they are structurally sound, free from serious hazards, and equipped with adequate heating and sanitation. While it may sound like common sense, these protections have never been guaranteed in the private market until now. For landlords, this expansion comes with significant cost implications. Meeting the Decent Homes Standard could require major investments in renovations, new boilers, safer wiring, or updated insulation. Those who already maintain high-quality homes will face little disruption, but others who have let properties deteriorate will be forced to upgrade or risk fines, enforcement action, or being barred from letting. Supporters argue this law is essential to raising the baseline quality of UK housing, especially since private rentals now house millions of families, not just young professionals or temporary tenants. Critics, however, fear that landlords unwilling or unable to pay for improvements may sell off properties, tightening supply even further. For renters, the long-term benefits could be transformative. Imagine walking into a flat and knowing it must legally be free from mold, dangerous wiring, or faulty heating systems. The standard gives tenants the right to demand safe living conditions without fear of eviction for speaking up. By embedding this law into the private rental system, the government is signaling that housing is not just an investment vehicle, but a basic human necessity that must meet acceptable standards for everyone. Number 1. The Renters Reform Bill, 2024-2026 implementation. The UK government has been working on the Renters Reform Bill for years, and by 2026 the final stages of implementation will transform the rental market. The most dramatic change is the abolition of Section 21 no-fault evictions, which currently allows landlords to remove tenants without giving a reason. For renters, this promises more stability and the security of knowing that their home cannot be taken away overnight. For landlords, however, it changes the balance of power, making it harder to regain possession unless they meet specific legal grounds. This shift is already sparking debate across the country about whether the reform protects tenants or creates new risks. Under the new system, landlords will need to rely on clearly defined eviction grounds, such as non-payment of rent, antisocial behavior, or plans to sell the property. This means tenants gain stronger protections, but also new responsibilities. If a tenant falls into arrears or causes serious issues, landlords can still act, but the process will be slower and more tightly regulated. Supporters argue that this law will cut down on unfair evictions, especially for vulnerable families. Critics, however, warn that stricter rules could discourage landlords from staying in the market, potentially reducing the number of rental homes available. The reform also ties into broader housing policies, such as digital tenancy agreements and streamlined dispute resolution. Tenants will be able to challenge unfair practices through easier legal channels, while landlords will need to keep clearer records. By 2026, the Renters Reform Bill is set to redefine what it means to rent in the UK. It could create a fairer, more transparent system, but it also carries the risk of shrinking the rental sector at a time when demand for affordable housing is already at a peak. The housing landscape in the UK is on the brink of one of its most significant transformations in decades. By 2026, tenants and landlords alike will be navigating a system defined by new rules on rent, safety, affordability, and eviction. For renters, many of these reforms hold the promise of greater protection, fairer treatment, and healthier homes. From bans on no-fault evictions to stronger quality standards, the message is clear: renting should no longer feel unstable or unsafe. Yet with these changes come real risks, as landlords warn of financial pressure, shrinking supply, and unintended consequences. The future will depend on how these laws are enforced and whether they truly balance the rights of both sides. For some families, the reforms could mean finally feeling secure in a long-term home. For others, they could trigger sudden upheaval if landlords decide to leave the market or invoke new eviction grounds. What's certain is that the 2026 laws will not simply tweak the rental system, they will redefine it. As the UK moves forward, the challenge will be ensuring that stability and fairness are not just written into law, but experienced in everyday life.